Hey guys, welcome back to A Story with Rory, the podcast. I'm your host, Rory, and we have a very special guest tonight named Rob. He's also an author, and we invited him on the show because he's got some very compelling stories that he has written and that he knows, and thought you guys might enjoy. So, hi Rob, nice to have you on the show, and go ahead and just go ahead and begin and tell us what you're picking to do tonight.
Thanks for having me on. My books are called Campfire Tales from Uncle Rob. They're available on Amazon. I've just had some odd, weird things happen to me over the years when I've been out hunting and fishing. One in particular is in the second book. I call The Lady in White. And a good friend of mine and I were out fishing on a sandbar on a creek, and we weren't really catching anything. We were like catching bullheads and, not catching much. And then all of a sudden, something was dive bombing us. And I never really got a good look, but it was something big. And I don't know whether it was a bird. I don't know what kind of bird would dive bomb you at night. But and my buddy, he swore it was a pterodactyl. He says he's seen, all I seen was a shadow from the, shadows are exaggerated, and whatever it was big. So we left the creek and we're driving back towards home, and just down a lonely county road. And I topped this little rise on this dirt road, and kind of down at the bottom was this lady standing beside the road, way late at night, all dressed in white, like a white nightshirt kind of, and she had kind of long dark hair, and it like hung over her face where you couldn't really see her face. And I slowed down and I moved over, and she just kind of turned a little and followed us as we went by real slow. And I thought she needed help. I didn't see any vehicles or anything around there, so I slowed way down and then stopped, and then went to back up. And my buddy was just freaked out. He was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, let's check on her, see if she needs help. What's she doing way out here?" So I back up way past where she had been, and she was just gone. And really no place for her to go. I mean, I got out, I looked around, walked through the ditch up on both sides to the fence line. It was just wheat field right in there where we saw her, but she was just gone. And I couldn't see her climbing over that 5-wire barbed wire fence in that long white night dress or whatever it was she had on. But I hollered, she was just gone. So whenever we got back to town, well, we went up to the sheriff's office, and I reported it. And they told us, the dispatcher told us that other people had seen this same lady, I guess, by the description, in that same area several times. So, which was weird. And they sent a deputy out to go check, but neither one of us ever heard anything back. But a few days later, I met with my buddy again, and he used to work at the local Chevy garage, and he told me that the guys at the garage had told him that what we had actually seen was a ghost of a lady that they called Mona of the Plains, which I had never heard of before. But so the story goes that she was a pioneer lady, and her family had been massacred by Plains Indians back in the day, and she'd been raped and had her tongue cut out. Supposedly, on the still dark nights, you could hear her moaning out there in that area. But she would appear to people driving down the roads, And
Hmm.
there was even stories that said if you didn't stop, she would like appear in your back seat.
Oh my
I don't know.
gosh.
That was just freaky. So I don't know whether she was actually an
Oh.
actual ghost, this Mona lady, poor woman, or I don't have any other explanation. She was
Mhm.
there, and then we couldn't find her. So
That's wild.
yeah, that's one story. Pretty freaky.
Hmm. I couldn't imagine that.
It was a weird night for sure. Pterodactyls and ghosts. Go
Right.
figure.
I mean, the only bird that I could ever see like swooping down on somebody might be an owl, at nighttime looking for food, but I
Yeah,
not on a person.
maybe it
Like,
was a maybe it was a big barn owl or a barred owl. I don't know. Like I say, I never really seen it. You
did
just
you hear it?
seen the shadow and felt you could hear it.
Okay. They say that barred
But
owls are really quiet when they fly. Like you can't even hear them. They're just like super quiet, I guess
well,
is
you
what I
would think
was.
they would have to be to swoop down on
Hmm.
unsuspecting prey.
Hmm. Absolutely.
To me, it felt like it was big from the air. You could feel or hear,
Hmm.
like sandhill crane size. But as far as I know, they don't fly around do that. I've never seen one acrobatic enough to keep dive bombing you 3 or 4 times. But who knows?
Right. As far as this ghost is concerned, did you actually get a good look or just kind of like an apparition of what she looked
I
like?
mean, she didn't appear to be like an apparition, like kind of semi-translucent. She
Hmm.
really didn't. I mean, she appeared solid enough to me, and I slowed down as we approached her. She was standing there. I thought she was a real lady, but
Hmm.
I just don't know where she went. Where could she have
Did her,
gone? There was no place for her to go. There were no houses around. There was no vehicles.
hmm.
And that little bottom down in there was pretty flat for a quarter of a mile down through there, down at the bottom of a little rise on the road. There's really no place for her to go. It was
Right.
weird. I don't have an explanation.
Did her
But my
clothing
buddy
look like?
Dale, it to me it kind of reminded me of if you ever saw or remember the old TV show Little House on the Prairie.
Hmm.
Um, the the girls would wear those white night shirts before they when they were getting ready to go to bed. To me, it reminded me of that. Like a just a from like the collar down to the ankles.
Hmm.
It wasn't like a negligee or a nightie or a night and maybe a
Right.
nightgown. I don't know.
Kind of like something from like the early 1900s, maybe.
I mean, that was kind of the impression, that we got. Both of us really. It was just I can't remember how long the sleeves were on her arms, but I remember it being up around her, collar and then all the way. You couldn't like see any legs. It
Hmm.
was obviously a lady, and yeah, the cover of my second book, I redid my cover and kind of put the Mona or the Lady in White, as I called it, the story on the cover. So,
Hmm.
in fact, I was talking to some ladies just the other day about that story and that local haunting, I guess you'd say, and they were telling me about some other people who had I guess seen her. This was back in the probably the mid to late '80s when it happened to me.
Hmm.
But I've heard, went for years and didn't hear really anything about it, and then all of a sudden was talking to another guy, and he just brought it up out of the blue, and I hadn't heard it for probably 10 years since then. Well, boy, I perked up. So, what do you know about this Mona of the Plains? And he started telling me these stories, and I'm like, I think I might have seen her. I don't know. I don't have another explanation. That's as good as any.
Right. Well, there you go. I mean, well, I definitely would like to get a copy of that book someday and read it, read through that. What is your book or number three? What's the one called titled "What the Hell"? What is that? What the hell is that about? Like, what is that about?
That's kind of the what the hell is kind of the subtitle. Is up at the
Hmm.
top. It says what the hell, and it's Campfire Tales from Uncle Rob, volumes 1, 2, and 3.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay, so it's all together.
yeah, it's all together.
Cool. So is volume three? What's that? What story is that about?
Oh, I think there's maybe I'm not sure. I can't remember how many. There's probably 10 stories in it.
Hmm.
Uh, some of them, it's kind of mostly the same cast of characters that I have. That buddies of mine that we hunted and fished together through the years. Sometimes stuff happens to me by myself, but uh, there's one story in that third volume that I think it's in that one. Fishing at another farm pond, but it was during the day, and with a buddy of mine named Leroy, and we had a little two-man, like a little bass buggy boat, and we were out on this pond, and we were fishing, and this pond was like infamous for big fish, supposedly,
Hmm.
and it had big trees out in the middle of it, and it had a lot of moss beds, pretty mossy in parts of it. And Leroy and I had got hooked up with some big bass in it, but they'd always get wrapped around something or get in the moss, and we'd wind up losing them. So we had it was right after when the braided line was just coming out, spider wire.
Right.
So we decided we would get some of that, and these fish, we're fixing to learn them a lesson. We'll try this spider wire, and so we're out here on this pond, and Leroy actually, first time using the spider wire, Leroy actually got a big fish on, but he lost it. And when he got reeled in, he had tied a swivel onto this line wire, and this fish had actually eaten the swivel, pulled it out of the little keeper, and just straightened it. So, and I was like,
Dang it.
"Why do you have a swivel on there?" And he's like, "Well, that stuff is so hard to tie a knot in, especially for he didn't really know much about it. So I just
Hmm.
thought I started use a swivel to use one of these like that I have here. It's got a little dog thing on the end where it can't just out of there. So he was like tying one of them on, and caught a few fish, and then all of a sudden Leroy says, "Hey, who's that?" And I kind of spun around in my seat, and I'm like, "Who? Where?" Over there in those cattails over there. Somebody looking at us. So,
Hmm.
over there, he said, "Yeah, right over there." Well, I look over, see anything cattails. Like, well, what did it look like? He said it was just dark. It seemed like a dark face. I'm like, was it a cow or a horse? Or he's like, I don't think so. Didn't look like a cow or horse. I didn't see any ears. I'm like, well, that's weird. And he goes, yeah, I don't know where they went. So about that time, we heard, I can't remember, we started having rocks thrown at us, big rocks, and they were arcing
Oh no.
out over and like there was a bank and some cattails, and it was like back in behind there, and this pond kind of narrowed down into a neck back up in there, and there was a creek, feeder creek, that ran into it. There was a bank that sloped over, and the rocks were like coming from over there, and we had pulled up to this spot and dropped anchor, and there was like
Hmm.
a rock every little bit getting pretty close to us. And I was like, pull that anchor up. We'll move out here in the middle of the pond and get away from this idiot. Well, he dropped the anchor down there and it was hung in a tree. We couldn't get loose, couldn't get away. And I'm I'm
Oh,
pushing,
man.
and I've got the little trolling, I can't get away, and I'm like, cut the rope. So he finally
Right.
gets his pocket knife out and he cuts the rope, and we spin around there, and then we heard the craziest laughing. To me, it sounded like kind of like a hyena laugh, but Leroy always said it sounded to him like a witch. I don't know what a witch sounds like exactly, but other than, So anyway, it was weird. And then
Hmm.
the rocks kind of stopped, but we kept hearing this weird laughter. I mean, it sounded like I guess if you crossed a hyena with a witch, that's kind of what it sounded like. It was weird.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of took the little boat out in the middle of the pond and spun it back around and right before as I was spinning it around, we heard something in the water, and we looked down into the neck down area where the little creek was running in, and something had ran across from one side to the other. I have no idea how deep it was back there, but the water was disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the laugh comes again, and it was from over on that side
Oh,
over there
no.
now. So the crazy thing was, is if it was somebody, we couldn't figure out how they got in there, because you kind of had to. There was only one way in, and you came down a pretty good slope, and then there was a little, like a cul-de-sac right down at the pond's edge where you could turn around and drive
Mm-hmm.
back out. To get in any other way, you'd have to go way out around. It was on a huge ranch. You'd have to go way out around and through about 5 gates, and then you couldn't drive down in there. I mean, you could get in there maybe on a four-wheeler or on horseback to
Mm-hmm.
get in from a different direction. This pond was like down in a canyon.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
so anyway, we decided we'd had enough. So we get over there to the bank where I was parked, and I mean, I just full bore runner up on the muddy bank there, and we jumped out and grabbed the little boat and shoved it up in the back of my pickup,
Mm-hmm. Dang.
and jumped in and took off, and we started up the hill there, climbing back out of there, and on our right was down where the pond was, and we heard that laughter again right down in there, kind of, so I just goosed it as I went up the hill. Well, I had one of them plastic bed liners in my pickup back then, and we had just unloaded the boat right in the middle of the road. It's like, I just like,
Oh,
we didn't tie it in, we
oh
were just
no.
in too big a hurry to get the heck out of there.
Right.
So the boat slides out, lands in the middle of the road. So I had to stop, back up, and didn't damage the trolling motor, thank goodness. It was sticking out the
Mm.
back. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we were definitely heads on a swivel while we're throwing the boat back up in there and tying it in, and
I bet.
that that was a weird, something weird, laughing weird and throwing big rocks like big as your fist,
Man.
arcing out over there like something was, running us off.
Right.
I never seen anything. All I heard was the laughter.
Hmm.
Leroy said he seen a face looking at us out of the cattails over there. So I don't know. It was weird.
I know sometimes frogs make like pond frogs make a little bit of a kind of like a chirp, but I don't think that's the same as like, like a laughter type deal. But
Oh yeah, I've heard all kinds of frogs. This was something. It was actually something laughing. Like
hmm.
it was somebody, or I, I don't know. It was creepy. Like I say,
Yeah,
to me, it
definitely.
sounded like a hyena, but then it had
Huh.
kind of a human quality to it. I have no idea.
Right. That's what's really eerie is that it has like a human quality to it because an animal we can all be like, oh, as an animal, but with the rock throwing and the creepy
Yeah,
laughing, like that's over the top.
I don't know whether to me, to throw a rock, you kind of got to have thumbs, don't you?
Yeah, animals don't throw
I mean,
rocks usually. I
I don't
mean,
know. Whatever it was had a heck of an arm. I mean, it was actually seeing the rocks, the trajectory of them in the air, seeing where they were coming
mhm.
from, and it was I couldn't, I always had a pretty good arm. I couldn't throw a rock that big that far, I don't think. But where it was had a major league arm, was chucking them, and didn't just throw one or two.
Yep.
There was,
Several.
8 or 10 that got, there were several that were lobbed at us, and they got pretty close enough to get us wet a few times. So, weird.
Kind of reminds me of the Ape Canyon story. It's like, I think it was back
yeah.
like early 1900s, late 1800s, something. The guys were down in this valley or down that canyon in the cabin, and middle of the night they get these giant boulder rocks thrown on their top of their cabin. And I'm just like, man, like,
Yep.
oh, I couldn't imagine that,
Yeah, probably. I mean, I've, like I say, I've had some weird stuff happen to me. I've had some UFO sightings. Saw a Black Panther one time, me and two other guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's something they say the wildlife department people say doesn't exist. There's no such thing. That they definitely exist. We saw one.
Right.
I got a friend who's works for the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife, and he was telling me, oh, there's no such thing as a black cougar. Well, I didn't say it was a black cougar. It's a big black cat, at least as big as a cougar.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd like, oh, it was a black dog, like a black lab, And I'm like, can a black lab jump to the top of a tank battery on a well location? Because that's what this cat did.
Man,
I don't think a dog can. What are those, 12, 15 feet high? I mean,
at
dog can't
least
jump like that.
At least. Dang it.
Then another buddy of mine, another farm pond story. I think it's the first story in the first book. There was I call it the pond monster. There was there's a something in that pond that run us off in the middle of the night. I don't know. It was like a miniature version of the Loch Ness monster, kind of. It had a head and a neck, and that pond was kind of infamous too. There was an old man that owned it, and he supposedly raised these fish, fed them, and had names for them, and they supposedly had like monster catfish in this farm pond, and it's one of them. When the old man was alive, he wouldn't let anybody fish, so it was one of them deals unusual for me. My buddy had been there before, and he's in several of my stories. A guy named Red, excellent fisherman, taught me a lot through the years. Mm-hmm. But him and a buddy of his named Don had been out there fishing, and Don had seen something at the pond that convinced him it was time to get the hell out of there. So they left, and Don, I guess, said it was some kind of he called it a sea monster. Of course, it's a farm pond. So, So the more I heard from the story, the more I wanted to go. I wanted to go to the pond.
Right.
So Red takes me out there in the middle of the night, and sneaking out there, which is not something I had done before or since that time. I think that's the one and only time I ever snuck into to a place. But I was so curious. So anyway, we were in there, and we kind of parked up on the hill and walked through the pasture down to the pond, and you could see across the pond over there this old man's house. He had like one light on a pole over there, so he's probably half a mile, quarter of a mile away from the pond on that one side. So we were trying to be stealthful. We were trying to ninja it, I guess you'd say. So
right. So
we're sitting down there fishing. We kind of separated on the bank, and we were fishing for catfish. That's what we talked about. So had something, had one rod with us throwed out. I did on the bottom, and I kept hearing this noise off to my right, kind of, but then out in front of me too. It was kind of a bloop, 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 bloop. And I thought that old Red was like throwing a topwater lure, like a jitterbug.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what it sounded like. And
That's kind of what it sounded like. And, 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 So I just kept hearing it off and on. It'd be close to me and it'd be a little further away. So finally I hear Red down there, maybe 30 feet from me, and he's like, "Is that you?" And I'm like, "I thought it was you. Are you fishing a top water?" I'm like, "No, I didn't bring any of that. I thought you were." "No, it wasn't me." So he
Hmm.
he moves his little 5-gallon bucket that he was sitting on over there about next to me and throwed out, and we're sitting there and kind of whispering to each other, and then we hear that bloop 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 bloop, and we look out there at the pond, and right about that time, the moon it was maybe a half moon. It kind of came out from behind a cloud or something, and you seen that moonlight shining on the surface of the pond, and there was a head and neck sticking out of the water swimming by, and you could see the head moving around like it was looking around,
Hmm.
and sticking out of the water maybe 18 inches or so. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a duck or a goose because there was no body. It was just a neck sticking out, and then a head, moving around on it. And
Mm-hmm.
it went by us a little bit and then kind of turned and kind of moved away from us and to the left a little bit. And we just sat there and watched it. And then Red, he leaned over to me and goes, "You about ready to go?" Yeah. Don was right. Let's get the hell out of
Yeah,
here. So
absolutely.
through the years, we wondered if that old man had something rigged up to scare people off that snuck in there at night. But
Makes you
if it
wonder,
was, it was good. It worked.
right?
I don't, whether he something on a rope and pulley system or maybe I don't know, a toy submarine, or I don't know what it was, but
Hmm.
it was freaky. But maybe, I mean, I swear to this day, I see the head moving around, but maybe I imagined it. I don't know, but it was creepy as hell. And I've never been back. And
Right.
I asked Red one day after that, uh, I said, "We need to go out there in the daylight." And he was like, "I don't think I can find the place in the daylight."
Right.
Only ever been out there at night. So,
Everything looks different during the day.
you know, I don't know. I've never been back. I'm sure that old man's, I know he's passed away. And then knew another guy who supposedly had the place. And, but we just never did. I just never did go back out there. But I'd heard lots of stories about the huge fish in there. But,
Hmm.
and then I heard the one story about the monster in it supposedly, and then seen the dang thing myself. So
That's wild. I mean, did it have like a lifelike quality to it, or did it look like maybe it just could have
I mean,
possibly?
yeah, to me it looked like something alive. I mean, I swear I could see the head, moving around as it was
Mhm.
swimming. If it was something mechanical or it was really good, you know.
Mhm.
I wouldn't think it'd be something like on a rope or something strung across there that, because we threw out, we'd have
Yeah.
snagged on it something.
Yeah, you would have caught on it at some
Yeah.
point probably for sure.
I'm not
Oh,
I'm not
man.
sure what the heck it was, but like I say, it was one of those nights. Made for a good story because it really
Yeah.
happened.
I'm just saying there's definitely weird stuff that happens in Oklahoma and Texas,
Oh yeah.
Arkansas, like this whole region of the US, California too, but and up north, but Oklahoma just has its fair share of just weird odd, and it's not just the weather, it's got its share of weird odd things that happen that are just like phenomenon and can't explain
Yep.
it. So for
Yeah,
sure.
I've got some of my stories down in Texas.
Hmm.
Went down to Caddo Lake fishing, looking for the Caddo critter, the Bigfoot type of deal. Uh, got a story about that. Back in the mid '80s, went out to Colorado. Uh, my aunt, her friend, cousin, and I went out. We were trop fishing, and we were camped along with two other vehicles at like a roadside park on a county road. And I've tried to find that place again. And my aunt, she
Hmm.
would never even talk about that night. But we, it was like a roadside park, and we were just camped in tents. along it was on a paved county road. There was a creek or a little river, some kind of stream across the road from where we were camped. We were just trout fishing over there and having pretty good luck. Anyway, that first night, my cousin woke me up and don't know what it was. Something was making a crazy sound. It started off when he woke me up. I'm like, we would hear like a crack, like a wood breaking, like a branch breaking or something, and then you'd hear like what we imagined or thought was footsteps. You'd hear thump, 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 thump. And in my mind, I was trying to rationalize, what am I hearing here? Is this a branch, a limb breaking off a tree, falling and rolling down the mountain slope, behind us back there? Well, then we started hearing this grunting and moaning, and the grunt was like a ruh, like really deep, and then the moaning just sounded like something. I don't know how to describe it. It just, something was moaning. And we thought,
almost kind of like a cow a little bit.
No, not really. I mean, it sounded like somebody in pain, kind of like they're, oh, that like, what in the world? That wasn't freaky enough. Then we started hearing this. For years, I called it jibber jabber. I mean, it was the craziest dang sound, and it sounded like almost sounded like a language, but
like samurai chatter.
It sounded kind of like a but it made like a kind of like that, and it was just echoing down through that little valley, and that was it. I said, I've got a pistol in the truck. Smart of me to leave it, not have it in the tent, but so I leave the tent. My cousin follows me, pitch black. My truck is black. I can't hardly see it. I finally see like something shining off what I think's the windshield, so I get over that way and find my truck and try to get in, and the door's locked. I'm like, I didn't lock the dang door. What's going on? So then I hear something hit the glass, and I'm peering in the side window there, and it's my aunt. She's in my truck with the doors locked and has my pistol, and it has it aimed at me.
Oh no!
I'm like, don't shoot. Let me in. Let us in. So we get in, and we all night we're in that truck listening to whatever the heck that was, and didn't get a heck of a lot of sleep. So the next morning, the other people there was like a man and a woman they were also in a tent. They were packing up and leaving. And there was a man and a woman and a little girl, and they were in had a slide-in camper in a pickup, and they were packing up. Well, I walked down there to talk to them, and they're like, yeah, don't know what that was. It was big. It was pissed off. Don't know what it was. We're leaving. So I went down to the people that had the slide-in camper, and the man, he seen me coming. I guess he heard me talking to them other people. Yep, we heard it. We're getting the heck out of here too. And the lady says there was two of them. I said, two of them? She goes, yeah, there was one over that way, and then there was one over this way, down on the other end of this little valley, and they were like making that noise back and forth like they were talking to each other. And then the little girl, she just pipes up and says, it was Bigfoot. And I'm looking at her, and they just, the lady or the mom, I guess, she just shut the girl up. So you get in the truck and shut up. So, but I'd never heard I always called it jibber jabber. Well, then years later, I was watching I think it was called Mysterious Monsters from like the mid 70s with Peter Graves. And there was part of that where they were listening to these alleged Bigfoot sounds have been recorded in Northern California called the Sierra sounds. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, I watched that on YouTube.
So I was watching that, and when I heard those sounds, I mean, it was like the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'm like, oh my God, that's what we heard. Yeah,
they were totally probably talking to each other.
Yeah, I found it on kind of getting dark in here. Well, that's any better. So I I found it on YouTube, the Sierra sounds, and I sent that to my cousin. I'm like, dude, listen to this. And he was like, oh my God, that's what we heard. So then I've heard people call it, like you said, samurai chatter, or I don't know. We called it jibber jabber for a long time. That's what it was to me. But like I say, I didn't see anything. We didn't smell anything, but we definitely heard some weird, I don't know, what else could it be? I don't know.
Right.
So,
Lines up. I mean,
yeah.
like 100%.
And then I had another, I guess it was I kind of had a sighting. I don't know. I was fishing a creek, and this creek was in a valley, and the creek they had used to, when you went down through this area, it was really cool area. They had like low water crossings. You could drive through the creek. They had like a concrete slab poured in there. Well, the county had come in there and put in some big concrete culverts, big boxes, and the creek, was running through them. So you didn't have the low water crossings anymore. So I would drive out there once in a while, and I would stand up on the box or on the wing wall of the box and fish, throw back up in those, and I was catching nice, 2-pound largemouth bass once in a while, or a spotted bass once in a while up in there. So one evening, maybe I'd been at a farm pond fishing, and I drove back through there. I thought I'll stop over there where that place and throw a plastic worm back up in there and see. So I stopped, and it's getting, down in up out of this little valley. It was probably still light, but it was getting dark down in this valley. So I get my rod and reel, had a plastic worm on. I'm standing about halfway up this wing wall on this box culvert. Is a 2-barrel box, and they were big boxes. They were probably 8 by 10, 8 foot high, 10 foot wide. And I threw up in this, right up just inside the, when I catch a little old, I don't know, 1.5-pound bass or whatever. So I'm thinking, got time for a few more casts before it gets dark. So I flipped back up in there further, and I think I might have even ricocheted off the wall, got it back up in there pretty good. And I'm kind of twitching it along, and all of a sudden the line it's like it's getting heavy, I'm thinking, oh, I've got one. So I kind of set the hook there, and it's like I'm hung up. And I'm thinking, oh crap, I've, hung up on a snag back up in there or something. So I set the hook a little harder, and then all of a sudden it just starts moving away from me. I mean, it's pulling drag, but it's not just stripping line, but it's like a steady pull. And I'm, what have I got here? Big old turtle or something? And so I'm like I tighten my drag just a little, and I'm trying to pull harder, and so all of a sudden, whatever this is just takes off away from me out the other end of the box, and I can hear something running. I can hear splash, 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 and meanwhile my rod's just throbbing. It's stripping line, and it just breaks the line.
Oh.
And I hear splash, 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 and I hear it come out the other end of the box. And I run up the wing wall, and I look across the road, and I just see a shape. And I could hear splash, splash, and I hear it when it left the creek, because it went from splash, splash to thud, thud, thud.
Oh, out of the water.
Yeah, came out of the water, and there's like willow trees over there, and I seen it was just dark enough I couldn't really get a good look at it. I could just see like a dark shape, but it didn't even slow down when it hit these willows. I mean, I could see it just plowed a wake through them. And I thought, what in the hell? So having several of these weird occurrences through the years, I was armed, but had a 44 mag pistol, but it was back in my truck, which wasn't far away. So I go back to my truck, and I get my pistol and a flashlight, and I walk down the road across the culvert, I'm going to look and see if I can figure out what the hell this is. So I go down and I cross over the fence and I get over there at these willows, and I can see, and the grass was about almost knee high right in there. And I
Mm-hmm.
could see where something had stepped. To me, it looked like two legs. I could see a depression, a depression, a depression, like, and then where the willows, it had hit the willows were like, I could see twigs and limbs up there broken, and they were like 7 feet high where it had went through.
Dang.
What the hell is that? So I'm thinking, I spin around and I'm trying to think, well, maybe I can see some tracks. So, and I look over at the box on the culvert that this thing had come out of, and against the wall, about a third of the way into the culvert, there's a lawn chair in the water up against the wall of the culvert. And the water was deep enough, it was maybe 2 or 3 inches below the seat on this lawn chair. I'm thinking, what the hell is a lawn chair doing sitting there? Did I just hook a homeless person, or what's that doing there? And I'm looking around, and I'm going, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
That's just weird. Why didn't they say something if I'd hooked them?
Right.
Somebody would have been yelling, hey, or, what were they doing in the box, with 18 inches of water in it?
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm looking along the bank there, and I can see right where the bank came up from the stream to the actual bank, like there was a gouge, like whatever had run out of there and like stepped right on the edge and raked its toes down just left but I can only see 3 toes on the little, not an actual footprint, just like 3 toes gouged, So I'm thinking, what in the world? What the hell? But I'm kind of looking around, and it was then that when I was looking around, I noticed how quiet it was. I mean, it was deathly still. No bugs, no birds,
Like
I
no
knew what
noise
that meant.
whatsoever.
Yeah, I knew what that meant. Everything gets quiet when there's a predator around. So that I started, even though I had a 44 Magnum pistol, I was like, yeah, not too comfortable being out here by myself. I don't know what that was. I don't know where it went. I don't know where
Right.
it's at now. So, and then when I got back over to the fence to cross over it, I kept thinking, if whatever this is going to jump me, that's when it's going to get me. When I'm be the most vulnerable halfway over this fence. So,
Right.
but nothing happened. I didn't see anything else. I don't know what the hell that was either. But I don't know if it was somebody sitting in the lawn chair. I don't know. And I
Is
call
that
that
story?
story I
Oh,
think
go ahead.
that's in the second. I think that's in the second book. I call it
Okay.
The Thing in the Culvert. Yeah,
That is, man, that's bizarre. Hmm.
yeah. Like I was telling you, I've had some weird stuff happen to me. I don't know.
Other than a fish, I don't know what that would ever be. Something that would run with your line and then break it, and
Well,
then you would hear
my
like,
first thought was it was a deer,
mm-hmm.
but that ran out. But what I could see over the road, that wasn't a deer. And plus those branches were broke above my head. That's a hell of a deer. I didn't see antlers. I couldn't really see anything but just a dark shape. And I couldn't even tell. It just looked like a shape, there was really no definition to it, but I don't know.
That's bizarre.
Uh,
Like that's crazy.
yeah, and then I've got some of my stories are just kind of funny, the story in the third book I call Strange Bubbles. Uh, I was probably, way back. I was probably 12, 13. My family and we were down at Lake Murray in Oklahoma. Beautiful lake. We'd went around and seen Tucker's Tower, what I'd always thought was a lighthouse, till just a few years ago I discovered that was never a lighthouse. It was a home that somebody had built and they never lived in. But so me being 12, 13 and loving the outdoors and loving to fish, I wanted to go exploring and go fishing. So I got hooked up with this other boy about my age. His name was Andy. And I think his mom worked at the state park there at the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and he came up with some bicycles. We had a few adventures and before this that I write about in that chapter, but I got my nose broke and we went swimming and got scared by something that really, anyway, the, he come up with he had a bicycle and he came up with another bicycle and we were going to go fishing. So we're riding our bikes along the lake and we come to a point where there's a paved road running along the lake and the lake was on our left. And there was probably a 25, 30-foot drop down to the actual lake, to the water off this. And beside this road, there was like a landscaped area.
Mm-hmm.
There was they had like trees and shrubs and big, like decorative looking rocks. And then there was a whole bunch of like smaller rocks. So, being boys, we stopped a couple places and looked over the edge. One place we stopped and looked and Andy says, "What's that?" And we look down there and there's this trail of bubbles. And they're like maybe a couple of feet wide and there's a trail of them and they're like moving towards us. They're maybe 10, 15 foot out from the edge of the rock face there. Well, what in the world? What's that? We're thinking big fish or a big turtle. Oh, being like, boys, we start throwing rocks at it. And we're like just bombarding these damn bubbles with rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start throwing, it's not bothering it, whatever it is, it just keeps moving. We don't have any idea how deep the water is there. So we graduate to bigger rocks. We're heaving boulders pretty much over on these rocks,
Yeah.
So then I get the bright idea. I said, if it's pretty deep here, this thing could be down along the bottom. And we're dropping a rock right on the bubbles. By the time it gets down there where whatever this thing is, the rock, it's already went past. He's up ahead. Whatever this is up ahead of the bubbles. The bubbles are trailing back, So then we get up ahead of it like 20, 30 feet. And we're heaving rocks ahead of it, like leading it, like shooting a bird in flight. We're dropping rocks ahead of it. So, and nobody ever drove down the road. That was crazy. We had to have been there 10, 15 minutes bombarding this thing with rocks. And finally we get to this little point where they kind of made a little right turn, kind of an angle to the edge there. And we come around this edge and there's a boat there. We're like, hey, what's that boat there? There's nobody on it. We're up above, we're looking down, nobody on this boat. It must have been anchored or tied off, So we continue to throw a few rocks at the bubbles and the bubbles come right up to the back of this boat. And we're thinking, ooh, what's going on here? And then we're like, ooh, the bubbles are intensifying. It's coming up. So we're like, got a big old rock and we're drawed back waiting and whatever this is to surface. And we see something black. I'm like, there it is. It's getting closer. Get ready. And then it came to the surface and it was a scuba diver.
No way.
This guy pops up. He pops up and we're in shock. He whips his mask off and starts looking around up above him. He's like, who's up there? And we're like, all we had to do was like take a step back and the guy couldn't see us. But
right.
So we just stepped back and we're looking at each other like, oh crap. Did we hit this guy? How close did we get?
Man.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So that's one of the funny stories that I've got in there. But
what was he doing out there? I mean, was he just
scuba diving, I guess, recreationally? Years later, I found out that you're not supposed to dive alone. So I don't know whether he had a buddy, like went the other way. I don't know. We only saw him and his bubbles and his boat. I don't know if there was anybody else out there somewhere. We never just seen the one guy. He was just recreational scuba diving,
I bet he learned a lesson that day for sure.
Well, we often wondered, if we'd ever hit him or if we ever dived that area again. He'd probably tell them stories. He may read the book and think, that's the dirty damn kids that were throwing it.
That was me.
Who knows?
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's good. Good stuff. Wow. Well, um, I'm
Like I say,
definitely going
there's
to get
three
your
books,
book.
and I try
Yeah.
to have a mixture in each one of them. In each of the three books about have some creepy stories and then some funny stories,
Hmm.
and I'm actually working on a new book now, but it's going to be fiction. So I'm working on it. So we'll see how that goes along. But
Cool, cool. Well, I greatly thank you for being on the podcast tonight and sharing
I've enjoyed it.
yeah, some of the stories out of your book. I would definitely like to have you on, in the future for sure. You've been one of my uh, best guests that I've had. So,
Well,
um,
that's great to hear.
other than that, have a good rest of your evening, and just want to thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Rory. Maybe it'll help us both out. Maybe I'll sell a few books and you'll get some more hits.
Right.
That'd be great.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Thanks for
It's
watching.
been it's been a barrel of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. All right,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks again for watching A Story with Rory. Until then, see you next time. And we're out.